Hey guys, this is Jerry Brewer of East Bay Hitting Instruction, and today I want to talk about some differences we see in Major League Baseball's players' swings. I think we're very good as a hitting instruction community to say, oh, this guy has a high-level pattern, or these guys all have elite patterns, all this and that. But I think what we don't give enough attention to is that these guys swing differently. There's some differences in their swings, and I want to point those out today. And so I just want to keep this in mind, guys who say there's absolutes and everything else is just style. I want to point some things out that say that these guys, inside their swings, even though they're high-level swings or whatever, there are some differences. And so we're going to look at Mike Trout and Buster Posey, and we're going to look specifically about how they use their hands. Okay? So the first one I want to show is Mike Trout. And so, unfortunately, this is against my A's. This is Sean Doolittle. Trout just yanks this ball out to left center, and the Angels win the game. So that was sad and unfortunate, but we do get a pretty cool look at his swing. And so here he is coming in from his swing, and the first thing we can see, if we kind of slow this down and play it, or at least this is talk about his top hand a little bit, what he's doing here. You can see really early, he's going to start to really get this barrel going back and around and down. He's really going to get the barrel working behind him, a top hand pivot, of top hand torque, whatever you want to call it. He's really, I borrow a term from the golfing world, releasing the barrel. This wrist angle, he's really letting go of that wrist. Right now he's probably at 90 degrees, and then it's starting to get even more and more, and he's going to make contact, pretty right over the plate, right at the front side of the plate. And you can really see this top hand angle between the top hand and the bat. You kind of got this this angle here. A lot of guys have a more straight line through the top forearm and through the bat. So he is really a top hand guy. He's getting his top hand going, turning this barrel, really from the very initiation of his swing. So he is a top hand guy. So let's look at somebody else. Let's look at Buster Posey. And so where's his one I wanted to show? See, here he is against Matt Latos a couple years ago in the playoffs, and this is a 94-mile-an-hour fastball that he just yanks out of the park, just like Mike Trout, kind of same position on the pitch and everything. And we can see from the side view of his swing, he's quite a bit different. If you look at his swing right here and look at his angle of his bat with his forearm, it's probably about 90 degrees. And then in his first move, he's not losing any. I would say he's even gaining some angle. He is not really turning that bat and getting it underneath the ball very early. He is kind of hanging on to that wrist angle, and now he's going to start to release it. And you can see his contact zone is quite a bit out farther. And this isn't a pitch that he was, way early on had the weight on. This was a 94-mile-an-hour fastball. He is using his hands quite a bit different. You can see the angle between his top forearm and the bat goes through. So, he is more of a bottom hand dominant guy. He is not, supinating like his top hand, like we saw Trout doing. He's kind of hanging on to this angle, and in my terms, releasing the bat pretty late. Here he is. You can see that angle he's got going on quite a bit. So there's really, two different ways to do this. This is not a difference in style. This is a flat-out different way to put the barrel on the ball. We can kind of look at some of these things. If we look at the top hand dominant swing, some of the guys who do this. I showed Mike Trout. He's probably one of the most extremes. Miguel Cabrera I would classify as a top hand guy. Albert Pujols definitely. Yoenis Cespedes is maybe even more than Trout. I would say he actually does it too much. Some things you see in these guys, contact is usually typical a little bit deeper in the zone. It's going to scoot a little bit more back off the front foot. The barrel path is a little more flat, and I'll talk about that in a second. And typically, not always, I don't want to cast too big of a net here, but they prefer the ball a little bit lower. Everyone knows Mike Trout is a low ball hitter. Yoenis Cespedes is definitely a low ball hitter. Even if you look at Miguel Cabrera's heat maps, his slugging per pitch is definitely, he prefers the ball down and in. So these guys are kind of, characterized by these things, these top hand stuff. If you look at the guys who are a little more bottom hand dominant, like I said, I've showed Posey, Chase Utley, Andrew McCutchen, Jonathan Lucroy, If you look at these as a population, these are typically your smaller guys, guys who hit and throw opposite ways. That's definitely going to fall in this category. I shouldn't say definitely, but more than likely. Contact is typically a little farther out in the zone. They're going to get up to the front foot. Definitely we saw this with Posey. Some of his contact is pretty far out there. And you're going to see the barrel path is a little more upright. And so what I want to show in that, let me show the comparison from the front view. And I have Posey on the left and Trout on the right. I tried to find a pitch that was similar, so we're going back to Latos inside fastball and then Trout on the right. And so as we play through this, we can see here at this position, it's really hard for you to see. But if you look at Trout's bat, he's got his bat kind of over his back shoulder. He's got kind of a 90-degree angle between his spine and the bat here. And Posey, not so much. His barrel is not behind his rear shoulder. It's up above his ear. He doesn't have quite the same angle Trout does. I would say Trout's coming at a more flat plane, and where Posey's coming in more steep. And you can see here, they get to the ball, and that's fine. But you can even notice in this one, if you really look at it, you can tell that Posey's hands are quite a bit farther out in front of his body. Trout doesn't have to get it that way. In fact, Trout actually has a hard time doing that because he supinates that wrist and brings his contact zone a little bit farther. So Posey's path is a little flatter. That's just all there is to it. And if you look at another one of the swings, let's go to Trout at spring training. And here he is coming through. This is an inside pitch. He just yanks out of the park. And we can see the same thing. He's going to really start to release that top hand very, very early. Kind of supinate that thing. We can see, Trout doesn't even really get that great of extension. I'm sure you've seen that photo of showing going around. Mike, he doesn't really get a lot of front rear arm extension. Why? Because he's given up that rear arm pretty early with that top hand supination. If you look at Posey, another swing. Kind of an inside low pitch. And here he's going to come in and look at him hang on to that angle. I would say right here he even adds angle. And so instead of really releasing the barrel right here, where Trout was already at least 90 degrees, I would say he's 115. He's hanging on to this quite a bit different and getting to a different position and hitting the ball quite a bit out front. And you can see from this, Posey gets pretty good extension. So what am I getting at here? One is these are different patterns. If your hitting coach says everyone has this a certain absolutes in their swings, everyone has this high level pattern, it's really not correct. This is a different movement pattern. If you look at some of the other guys I showed, they honestly swing the bat a different way. Here we go. Jonathan Lucroy, he can see him same thing as Posey coming in with the bat pretty steep, and then here we have Cabrera, and he's coming in pretty flat. They're bottom hand versus top hand guys. Who else did I want to show in terms of a comparison? Chase Utley. He's very, very steep. And then Pujols, you can see here, he's dropping this bat pretty flat behind him. He's got this 90-degree angle between his spine and his barrel. So these guys are swinging differently. And which one is better? Honestly, I would prefer to see somewhere in the middle. I think Trout is kind of an extreme of the top hand, and I think Posey is kind of extreme of the bottom hand. I would like to see somewhere more in the middle. I think a guy who blends it really well is Josh Hamilton. I wish his plate discipline was as good as his swing. Well, maybe not because he plays for the Angels. But looking at this, if I had to pick one, I would say I'm a bottom hand guy. I think the top hand dominant swing requires more strength. If you looked at the guys on the list, they're pretty big dudes. I think that's kind of a lot to ask of a 125-pound JV baseball player in high school to really get that bat going with that top hand. I think it's hard to do. But I will say, it's a sample size of one, man. If it works for you, then go for it. I'm definitely not going to walk up to Mike Trout and say, hey, man, you need to hang on your wrist angle a little bit longer. I'm not going to cruise up to Posey and say, hey, dude, how about you release a little bit earlier? Definitely not. These guys are successful, and that's the key. But I do want to make it clear, they're swinging differently. There's not some absolute swing pattern we have to fall into. There's some give. If you're a bigger guy and you feel comfortable doing the top hand swing, great, more power to you. If you're a little guy and you need to get every bit of lever arm you can, You know, sure, be a more of a bottom hand guy. There's no problem with that. But you know, I will just say, it's kind of my closing. If you walk up to your hitting coach and say, you know, who are your top, you know, swing models, and they say Posey and Trout, you know, those guys are kind of on the opposite spectrum. You know, you need to be aware of that, what's happening here, at least in terms of hand use. And they're really coming from from different sides. And if you say Cabrera and Lucroy, or Cabrera and Utley, I mean, you need to think about that these guys are swinging the bat quite a bit differently, and it's not just style. And which is wrong? Neither one. You know, whatever works for you guys. So keep in mind on this top hand and bottom hand function, you know, there's more ways to skin a cat, more than one way to skin a cat, and no way is wrong, and try to meet somewhere in the middle. All right. So I've used these videos courtesy of MLB Advanced Media. I've used them as illustrations that fall under the Fair Use Act. So keep this in mind. If you have any questions about it, let me know.